So thank you everybody for coming. My name is Martha Gray, and I've been on the faculty for many, many years, and been one of the lead faculty that started Catalyst together with many others about 14 years ago, 14, 15 years ago. So we're excited to have your interest. We have, as you may know, just opened applications, and so for the first time, we thought we'd run an info session on opening for people who have already seen the word and can hear about us. So we'll spend some time today. I'll introduce the program briefly. You'll have a chance to hear from one of our VA partners, and perhaps most importantly, hear from fellows who have experienced the program, and they can let you know what it's like, and you'll have a chance to ask any questions that you might have now and in the future. Um, and feel free to put questions in the chat. It's hard for me to follow questions while I'm talking, but or you can save them for the Q&A session, whatever you're most comfortable with. Feel free to do either. Um, so we're assuming you're here in part because you'd like to have an impact in some way in human health, in healthcare more generally. And so, in that context, having that impact is to do something great. Um, but it's easy to say something like that. And what we really think a lot about in Catalyst is how do you actually put yourself in a position to decide what to do and to execute on that so that you have a greater chance of having that kind of impact. And if we've learned anything, it's that it's a lot about thinking differently. We're trained in a particular way, and a lot of the ways we're trained um, are not as supportive as they might be to finding real new problems to solve and ways to solve it. So it's this thinking differently that we think is just so critical to innovation. And one of the reasons for that is that, as we go through our education, we've developed a particular kind of mind map. We've learned new knowledge from our life experiences, from our education, and so forth. And this is the thing that really provides the context for your decision making and for your framing the world. So just to cite a specific example, imagine you're a clinician walking into a patient encounter. Of course, you're going to use the medical facts that you've learned along the way and your experience. Um, but you respond to that interaction also based on your prior experiences, your experience with a particular patient, with that disease, with the institution you're working in. And it's that kind of interaction, when I say the mind map, that's what guides that process. And your mind map continues to evolve. And so part of changing how you think is in fact changing the mind map to increase the likelihood of innovation. So put another way, um, as the broader your mind map, the broader your view of the world. And in some sense, that's an easy thing to accept. The more you learn, the more you know, the more you're able to do. But it's the other side of it that is in fact the most insidious and the challenging, is the part that you can't see. In fact, we fill in around what we know with what we think must be true given what we know, not often without any sort of factual basis. So you truly do have blinders on. And this can be overcoming this can be one of the real ways to get insights and opportunities for innovation. And not overcoming it can lead you um, into almost a trap of not really seeing what the problem is. That naivete comes up, for example, if you talk to somebody with no experience in medicine and they tell you how medical decisions should be made. And very often those are very naive as to what the reality is on the ground. Often have people that say their innovation is going to be really important to pharma, but they have no idea how pharma works and how they make decisions, and that it's not as easy as it might look to make drugs and to sell them, and so forth. So these are the kinds of things we really try to overcome in Catalyst, is to overcome that naivete and that everybody has. We all have it in areas in which we don't have any deep experience. And so one of the key ways we do this in Catalyst is to have you work together with people who are not like you. So you're not doing this alone, you're doing it with a cohort of other people. What you share with those other people is the desire to work together to advance human health in some way. And in this case, it's desiring to design and execute research projects that have that potential. And when you talk to fellows who have gone through the program, uh, almost always one of the first things they say after they've had an initial 6 months or so is to talk about how it's changed how they think about problems, how they interact with others, how they think about their day job, and how they think about their future careers, sort of above and separate and apart from their specific project that they may have developed. So fundamentally, this is a life-changing experience. It'll change how you think, it'll change your network. Um, but to get more concrete, what we actually do that engenders those changes, um, what is it that we do when we work together? So operationally, Catalyst has two phases. Um, the first phase, you enter as a cohort of fellows, um, and you work together to develop a portfolio project proposals. These are proposals uh, that address an unmet need that you've found evidence for, and you've demonstrated there's a real opportunity to address it, and you have a solution that might address that opportunity. And you do this under the guidance of a cohort of faculty. In the second phase, you proceed as teams, so that you won't come out of phase one with one project per fellow. You'll come up with, roughly 3 or 4 projects that you work together with on teams. In the second phase, you'll expand your team so that you have sort of the workforce needed to make progress on the project, and we'll still mentor it with faculty, though smaller numbers that work with you as a team. And what you're trying to do there is to collect evidence as you execute, so that your idea will work and that this can be used to convince future funders. After that, teams generally, become independent in some way, either continuing in academia or becoming a startup or licensing their idea to somebody else, whatever makes sense for the project, where it continues to develop and ultimately leads to real world impact. Now, to explain in a little bit more detail how phase one itself works, um, to spark new proposals, the first thing we do is talk about what the real needs are. We have lots of ideas about what those real needs are, but then we really try to dig in and understand whether they are indeed needs and that there would be value in solving them. And then we think about what those solutions might be to address those needs. So a need without a solution isn't an opportunity, but when you have a well-matched need-solution pair, then you might have the opportunity to make a difference. But your ability to deliver on that opportunity depends on actually having some form of research plan. So that comprises the third element of phase one. We lay it out neatly, sequentially, but it really does not happen that way. There's a lot of iteration going back and forth among ultimately these 3 components, a little bit like wandering through the woods because there's no clear path necessarily, but you're starting to make one. But in the end, your proposal is a logically connected, evidence-based plan that, if it all works out as you hope, it can lead to impact. For many, this is really the most unfamiliar and challenging part of the process. It doesn't sound very hard, but it turns out, and you can speak with the fellows about this, that it forces you to address those assumptions that you're making, to identify those assumptions, and to think in very, very different ways. There's so many possibilities, which ones make sense and which ones would add value. So we don't just ask you generally what's needed. We really want to understand what's the bad outcome, what's the thing you're really trying to affect, who's affected by that, and if they're going to be better off, in what way will they be better off, and do you have any way of knowing that if you invoke your solution, that they will be better off. this is one of the contrasts with maybe traditional, research projects where the question, at least in the world I live in, that people often ask is, can you publish it? Or can we publish it in a high impact journal? That might be a nice byproduct, but but these are the fundamental questions you have to answer if you're going to design a project that has a high impact. And we're not going to ask you to answer them by yourself. They're very hard to answer and get evidence for these questions, but we build a community and you work together with your colleagues to develop those answers. So in this, I should have backed up here, to just point out that I mentioned that you're going to work with a cohort of mentors. And I would say just as the fellows and the mentors are professionally diverse. This is a picture from an early meeting, and in this photo, there's somebody who's a radiologist, a biotech CEO, a physicist, an infectious disease doc, so we're really talking about very different kinds of world experiences and mind maps, if you will. And there's through that is one way in which we're able to identify the sort of gaps in understanding and gaps in thinking. So in all likelihood, the discussions we have during phase one are not the ones you've had during your professional lives, and certainly during your training, almost no matter what direction you're in. And again, that's what we hear from fellows. So despite it being chaotic, it does lead to a project portfolio that has and the portfolio of projects each has the following sort of characteristics: that there's a need that, if solved, people were convinced would be valuable, a solution that's well matched to that need. I'm not saying it can't be risky, but it is well matched, that if it works out, it will make a difference. And but it can't be a magic wand. And of course, a plan that says this is something that you as fellows could actually make happen. So ideally, we'd like the plan to have not only these, but engage multiple stakeholders. It's hard to solve meaningful problems without it almost always involves a situation that requires multiple stakeholder considerations. It requires some form of scientific inquiry, not something you could do sort of on weekends in your kitchen table, but something that requires some time for inquiry. Potential for funding is, of course, helpful. It's hard to, we need money to make progress. And we're looking at a time span of, half a year or a year to about 5 years. That's sort of the sweet spot. So fundamentally, phase one is the process of de-risking your proposal. This is a slide, some version of this shows up in almost every entrepreneurship book or course. And the notion is that startup companies fail mostly because they build something that nobody wants. So it's kind of by analogy, the main goal of phase one is to de-risk it, to make sure that you address a need that people actually care about. And the faculty will help you, again, through that process. Now, these projects, one of the unusual aspects, and that we can, because we have so many partners, we can do this, is that the kinds of projects you can pursue are not really constrained by a particular form of expertise or a particular individual or a particular lab or a particular institution. You do have the freedom to go between specialties through technologies, and we've had projects that have come out have been very diverse with respect to the medical specialty, with the technology that underlies it, with the time frame, and so forth. And as I've already mentioned, the fact that we have a very diverse set of backgrounds, both in the fellows and as well as in the faculty, that contributes to the creativity. Even though, again, I've laid it out linearly, project ideas pivot. I just want to emphasize that in some sense that's part of the process and not something you necessarily have thought a lot about beforehand. Um, for those of you who are experienced in research, we're not looking for preliminary results where you've proven it will work. We just want evidence that this is a rationally good way to spend your time. So that's phase one. Um, just a few comments about where phase two takes you. And I'm just reminded to have you think about this. The phase one is about 6 months, but as you think about entering this program, you should have at least a year in your head that it'll give this project, your experience, a year, and then see where things stand from your perspective and beyond. And then the sort of second half of that year is when you enter phase two and you really begin to execute. So at this point, as I mentioned before, we work in a project specific way. Instead of meeting as a full cohort with a full cohort of faculty, we move to biweekly meetings with a small number of faculty. Um, and let's see, initially, sorry, go to the next slide. The initial part of phase two is actually building your team. While it's important that fellows bring something to the team and can play a significant role in execution, it's almost always the case that you need more people to actually move the project forward, whether in the form of students that can do work or finding additional expertise in the form of other principal investigators and so forth. And then you develop your strategy. You're continually trying to de-risk it, and your faculty will help you do this to close the gap between where you are and showing that this solution idea has a chance of making a difference. And again, make a case for somebody to be involved in supporting you financially and otherwise, and then ultimately graduate for independence. And the amount of time this takes is very project dependent. People often move in and out, but it's typically in the order of a couple of years. Then after Catalyst, you leave with projects that are clearly focused on healthcare impact. They're ready for investment, but significantly, you as fellows are transformed. You understand yourself better. You have new ways of thinking about your goals, your career horizons. By virtue of that, are adjusted. You have different ways of parsing the world and understanding what other people are doing. Just to convince you that this does lead to things that do have that kind of impact. Looking back to a program, the initial incarnation of this program, these are projects that have had some time to gestate. And in the group I'm talking about, there were 16 projects that involved 4 cohorts of fellows. And so a total of 34 and 50 mentors, and then a whole bunch of other participants. So, while the group of fellows is a small number, the collective effect of bringing together people is significant. These have 3/4 of them have managed to get follow-on funding, and the rate at which they've gone into translation, meaning it's been licensed to or form the basis for a startup company, is about 50%. That's of course not the only possible exit, but it's highly measurable. And if you compare that to, sorry, I didn't mean to go backwards, to a traditional paradigm, it's significantly greater. And we think that the reason for that has a lot to do with our eye on de-risking and closing that gap between where you are now and how you show that it's going to work. The fellows themselves, through various educational research we've done, talk about how it's changed their mindset, changed their trajectory, and expanded their reach. To give one specific example, one of our older teams went by the name NeuroQWERTY when they were in the program, and their idea was to use activities of daily living as an indirect way or a direct way of measuring motor function, a particular kind of motor function, through typing on a keyboard. And turned out to be very specific in identifying early onset Parkinson's disease. The goal initially was not so much to diagnose Parkinson's disease, but to actually provide a tool that allowed you to titrate the medications, which is something that's really hard to do with the kind of lab-based motor skill testing. So that was their idea. Involved a lot of technical sophistication and clinical studies. But if I think, excuse me, think about how it developed during phase one, it did not start on day one with the idea. Nothing that I just showed you was on the table on day one. Most of the people that wound up on this team started thinking about errors that radiologists make in reading scans, especially late in the night, which got them to eye movements to detect fatigue, which brought them to air traffic controllers because they weren't finding traction in radiology. Returned to radiology. And then they got to typing speed as another measure, and then fine motor control diseases and then typing patterns. And that's ultimately, excuse me, where they are. So, this is again to point out that as well it laid out needs solution plan, that it is more chaotic. And the focus of the ideas evolves over time as you learn more and more. Okay, finally, I just want to end with, just to make it crystal clear as I can about the difference between a research paradigm and the Catalyst program. So traditionally, if you're headed in research, you're thinking about how do we produce new knowledge, which maybe other people can use to advance health. Our primary focus is on improving healthcare outcomes. It doesn't mean we don't do knowledge generation. It's just that knowledge generation becomes a natural byproduct. Because of the nature of how research is structured, there's a huge incentive to go with what you know, and risks are discouraged. We really want the focus to be technology agnostic, and an incentive to solve problems by the best means available. In fact, we've learned it helps a lot if you're slightly adjacent to what you know best, because if you think you know something, you also own not only what you know, but all of the tacit assumptions that have been embedded in your training through decades sometimes. Traditionally, research is PI centric. There's some faculty who drives the program, they write the grants, they do everything, they hire the people that are involved. This is a case where you will own the project. We advise, we ask lots of questions, we cajole, we do all those things, but you ultimately make the decision about what you're going to do. You decide how to maximize your resources, you decide what's important to you, and how to engage. And so that's an avenue of growth, but also a huge avenue of opportunity for you. Performance in traditional research paradigm reinforces the silos that we have. If you're not in research, you've been educated, and there are specific departments, and there's a lot that keeps stuff within particular departments, and medicine is similarly siloed. And here, the real performance requires just really force you, not just encourage, but it's hard to get away with not talking to people who are from different positions, different disciplines, different careers, etc., that are required. And finally, we've probably all been trained in a hierarchical training system. Sorry, we've all been trained in a hierarchical training system we found in Catalyst. So, the fellows, you're the focus, but we have faculty that participated for decades, more than a decade. And I think it's because everybody involved, whatever your role is, we tend to learn a lot. And so we learn from you as much as hopefully you learn from us. And I won't go through this in detail. There's some things about us that are similar to an incubator, but again, because we're really focused on improving healthcare outcome, we're not at the point where it's really an incubator trying to get stuff commercialized, even though I've shown it as a measure. So for Catalyst 2025, just a few quick points. We do have a number of partners that are our primary partners. Our center of gravity is at MIT within the Institute for Medical Engineering and Sciences and the MIT Office of Innovation. In the VA, we're part of the VHA Innovation Ecosystem. And I mention this for both so you know, but also because a number of ancillary resources and opportunities come through the vehicle of these partners. They become idiosyncratic to the class and what's needed, but these are really, really important hosts. And I'll use that as a segue to just give my VA colleagues, who have been terrific partners over the last, I think, 5 years on this to talk. Mike, are you there? I can't see anybody.
Yeah.
All right, now the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. So 2025 will be the VA's 5th year partnering with Catalyst. This is my 2nd year of involvement, and a couple of things have stood out. In VA, you mostly work with other VA employees, usually in your own discipline. In Catalyst, engineers, researchers, non-VA clinicians, and entrepreneurs from around the world self-form teams around solving things. I can't overstate how much thought and effort goes into assembling the right cohorts of people to solve. Secondly, you are learning a proven methodology for innovation and needs assessment. They'll become so ingrained in you that whether intentionally or not, you will apply it to every challenge that you're going to face in your profession. And the third, I see Dr. Emily DeFreitas on this call. She's one of our phase 2 fellows, and she's working on a project that aims to detect psychosis in high-risk populations for a first episode using NLP, speech and text capture. And I saw a demo of it last month, and it's real. And I mentioned that it's real because, like what Martha was saying, this program isn't just didactic, it's not just academics. Catalyst develops real projects that impact. So you'll not be surprised to learn that VA employees have reported personal, professional, and career growth that they directly attribute to their experience. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm gonna just mention a few logistics and then I think turn it over to Melissa. Is it time to turn to students or should I go through logistics now?
I think we should go through the logistics.
Okay. So logistically, um, during the phase 1, the first 6 months, we meet weekly on Wednesdays from 10 to 1 Eastern time. These are remote meetings. We also reserve the time from 10 to 11 on Mondays. What happens there, it varies over time, but it does provide an easy time for people to get together because you've scheduled it on your calendar. So that's when we do the work. There is work between sessions for you to prepare for them, because ultimately at the end of the phase 1, you're coming up with a proposal, and that's a non-trivial undertaking. There are 3 times where we come together for 3 days. We call them intensifications. We do those in person, most likely at MIT. And these are all on the website. They're in January, February, and May. And this gives us a reasonable mix of, by doing things remotely, it enables us to include people from across the US. But I think coming in person is a particularly powerful time where things advance quite a bit as a result of all working together in person. The nominal workload, you absolutely need to be able to devote 15 hours a week, I think, and that includes both the scheduled times that I've mentioned, but ad hoc times where you try to meet with other faculty or other people or interview people. There's work that you have to do independently. We hope that you'll at least try to reserve a year in your mindset. that we will ask you at 6 months if you want to continue on to phase 2. But I think you should walk into this, think with, if this, it's not something that's intended to end after phase 1, that the making a real project, as Mike said, these are real projects. You want to be a part of making those projects happen if that can continue to work with you in your job situation. In terms of costs, we have been fortunate to have some generous donors and of course our partners. And so at present, we do not ask you to pay tuition. For travel, the VHA supports the in-person participation, the travel for that. And we ask the non-BA fellows, we don't have travel funds to support your travel. If there's a hardship case, of course, we do want to hear from you. We don't want this to prevent you from applying. The process, the applications are open now, but we ask that you apply by August 5th. We'll issue invitations for interviews by the week of August 23rd. Put on your calendar that there will be interviews so that you're free that day on September 6th, which is a substantial part of the day for the interviews. And then we'll announce the selection in mid to late September. Okay, I think we'll just turn it over now, I think, to the fellows, because I think they should have the last formal word here. So I will stop sharing, and Robbie, are you seeing it?
Yes. Thanks, Martha. Thanks, Mike and Melissa. So great to be with everyone. And I know what it's like to be at an information session, trying to understand what this program is all about. And I just thank you for being here and your interest and your enthusiasm. As Martha said, my name is Ravi Rasalingam. I'm a fellow from the Catalyst 2019 Spring cohort, and currently at the VA hospital in Boston as a cardiologist focused in imaging, with an appointment at Harvard Medical School, but have transitioned more towards a biomedical entrepreneurship focus, focused and centered around the 2 projects that I'm working on that came out of Catalyst and are currently phase 2 projects. One is related to the treatment of obstructive sleep apnea, and the other is in the sexual health space, trying to reduce sexually transmitted infections. Very different from my day job as a cardiologist, but just as an idea of how Catalyst draws all of your knowledge together and is not focused on just a pathway that's predetermined, which I find very freeing. So for any of you who are curious and really want to use all of your knowledge, I think Catalyst is just a wonderful opportunity. And I'll just share a few reflections of my experience before handing it over to others. But as Martha said, I think when you come to Catalyst, you may not have a full appreciation of what this program is all about, but you quickly do, as you start to participate, and you realize that several things that you might not have been fully aware of, just how critical they are. And one of them is the importance of true collaboration with people who are very different than yourselves, and how meaningful that is when you're trying to innovate and create something new and important to healthcare. And the other is just a willingness, to let your curiosity guide you. And that might be not towards a book or looking at research articles like like I was used to doing, but more practically meeting people, talking about, what you're working on, gathering customer feedback, in this space that you're interested in, and trying to do things that you might not have, been aware of how important it is. And so, I just have found the program incredibly valuable, not only to the projects that I'm working on, but also to my career in general. And so it's been a great experience. So with that, I would like to invite others, and I can start with maybe Gar to talk about her experience. And just to frame it, we're going to have everybody just, introduce themselves, what Catalyst year they're from, what their current position, their project, and some reflections.
Of course. Hello, my name is Ska. I am a fellow in the first year. So it was 2024. So we're in the current phase 1 of the process. My day job is being an MD PhD student. Currently in the PhD portion of my training here at MIT doing chemistry. So kind of like Robbie mentioned, the projects that I am exploring within Catalyst is quite different from what I do during the day, which I think has been very refreshing. So for example, there's a couple projects that I'm involved in, including investigating post-lung biopsy pneumothorax in COPD patients and how to reduce that, as well as how to reduce aspiration pneumonia in post-stroke patients who might have trouble swallowing. So I'm in a very diverse team of engineers, nurses, physicians of various specialties. And I guess about this project, I have some reflections that I can share. Especially given that in my day job, I'm in an academic research setting, it is very common to start with a technology, start with a platform that is already established and try to look for applications for that platform. Within Catalyst, it's actually been very refreshing to start with an application that you care about, validating that application, and then thinking of the best technologies that you can maybe incorporate or come up with to fit the needs of that specific application. So kind of like a reverse process in a way. I also really enjoy the synergy that we have working with, people with various fields. Even within medicine, for example, I have people who are interventional radiologists in the team, people who are family doctors, and we have engineers as well as nurses. And it's really interesting trying to bring the different expertise together, and we learn so much from each other. So for example, we're thinking about how to measure our outcome. The engineers in the room might have a very good point about how to really detect a signal in what you're looking at. And that's something that I might not have considered as someone who's a trainee in medicine. And the folks in engineering, they might have certain ideas about, for example, certain solution concepts. And the physicians in the room have really great insights about, oh, this might not be used by the folks who are actually using it because it is uncomfortable in XYZ manners, for example. So it's been a very good synergy between different specialties that I really appreciate.
Great. Thank you so much, Gara. Emily, can I invite you to share your experience?
Sure. Hi, I'm Emily DeFreitas. I'm a psychiatrist by training, and I'm currently the section chief for the mental health intensive case management program at Greater Los Angeles VA. And I was a Catalyst Fellow in 2023, and I'm currently in phase 2 for a project, as Mike mentioned, which is called CHIRP. But it's essentially a device that we are creating that will use natural language processing, hopefully, to detect formal thought disorder, which is a symptom domain for persons at clinical high risk of psychosis. And I wanted, a couple of things. One is, I think, I'd been practicing medicine for about 15 to 20 years prior to joining Catalyst, and I had, become comfortable in my assumptions about the way things work. And one of the most refreshing parts of Catalyst has been realizing that I really need to question a lot of those assumptions about the way I look at things, about the way other viewpoints from people in engineering or in statistics, which are not people that I interact with on a regular basis, are just so helpful to the way I think about clinical problems. And it's just been really, the highlight has been working with the other fellows. So on our project right now, we have an aerospace engineer from Madrid. We have a physicist who studies eyes with Ben at Mass General Brigham. And we have a psychologist at Boston VA. And it is just the most collegial, wonderful group of people. And we challenge each other to think in like new and diverse ways all the time. Phase 2 has been really exciting. We've applied for grant funding in Spain. We presented a poster at the MIT AI conference. And we're just continuing to try to form national and international collaborations to see if we can make progress. So it's just, I think, really expanded. I was sort of, been practicing in a certain way for a while, and the Catalyst has really allowed me to expand the way I think about things and enrich my career in a really realistic way. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I encourage clinicians to take advantage of this. It's a really excellent program.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Alex, can I invite you to share your experience?
Absolutely. There is no other Alex on the call, correct? Okay.
Nope, it's you.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Alex Alvarez. I was from the 2022 cohort. I had to relook that up since it feels a couple of years flies by really fast. I'm currently a staff new product development engineer at Johnson & Johnson. That is essentially just a lengthy title to say I help develop manufacturing processes for biomedical devices. So one of the big reasons why I was intrigued with Catalyst is as an engineer who has been developing already designed medical devices, what was it like on the beginning side to really address a problem and then see the solution through the ideation phase? So I have continued to learn and grow in that. It's been exciting to go through funding, IP patent work, and actual design, right? I do design of equipment and fixturing, not the product itself. So there are similarities, but there's quite a few differences as well. Two of the key takeaways I remember from phase one. The first was similar to Robbie mentioning with the collaboration. This was truly a first experience with multidisciplinary, not just multi-technical and different engineering functions. So this has been essential in my work life, just regards to now handling higher leadership stakeholders for bigger projects. The second is as part of the proof of principle that you have to end with in phase one, they really throw down a pass-fail criteria of your milestones. This is applied both personally and professionally. I think the most notable in my work was I was disproving assumptions of a project, a multi-million-dollar project, and found that it needed to be killed because it was no longer meeting that criteria that we initially said we needed. That was a very hard conversation to have, but was essential so that we didn't drain more dollars continuing through and then realizing it wasn't doing what we were supposed to. And then just on a personal side, use pass-fail criteria to even end up changing the job that I now have currently for technical development, what I was getting, what I wasn't, that kind of thing. So overall has just been beneficial in all aspects.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. Akshay, are you on? If not, I think those are all the fellows I see, Melissa, unless I'm missing someone.
Akshar is on and he's unmuted, but I'm not
Okay.
hearing him. So I think we should continue on.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Sorry, so we're in the process of moving, and so everything's a little bit chaotic. So I apologize for not being on camera. I'm Akshay. I'm an ophthalmologist. I'm with VA. I began in Catalyst in 22. I echo the thought that that feels like a long time ago. And I really want to just sort of bottom line up front. I want to come back to the note of thinking about the processes that you will learn and essentially the cognitive architecture that you'll build as kind of changing your mind in a way that I think is really powerful and really important. So it's easy to access what you would learn in Catalyst as a skill set, as a tool set. Like if you approach a challenge in healthcare that you think is important and you want to understand, how do I define what the problems in this are? How do I validate that these are problems that are documentable and are non-trivial to solve? How would I know that I'm making success or creating success? How do I know that I'm making progress? What would happen if I solved it? It's easy to look at that just as a toolkit, but I really want to encourage everyone who is considering applying, if you're considering, definitely do it, but to think about it not just as a set of checklists or a set of tools, but really a chance to change how your mind encounters problems and works through them. Because what I would say is that in addition to the wonderful notes, the multidisciplinary notes, sort of not just entering a situation and saying that everybody agrees on the root characterization of the problem, but actually kind of internally litigating that from all of our different perspectives and seeing how valuable it is to see the way people bring different cognitive lenses to the same problem, but to actually determine what the problem is. That's an incredibly powerful skill. And so you'll have parallel sets of value, I think. One, in the joy and the work of actually working on the problems that you're working on within Catalyst. And two, this will flow back into how you address problems in everything else you do. So I would say that I could feel my brain kind of stretching and growing as we work through the process, and in ways that have stayed with me long after working on the specific project. You are going to approach your day job differently. I think you're going to approach your current work differently. So I would say to really embrace the value of getting to solve and build, but also be excited for the growth and the journey that you'll have, the mental journey, the learning journey that you'll have, and the new way of thinking that will come to you. So, I don't want to go on and on, but it's a really remarkable community, a wonderful experience. I can't recommend it highly enough. And so I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to that part.
Great. Thank you very much, Akshay. It's very nicely put, and I think it's a good place to end there for the fellows' reflections. So, Melissa, back to you.
Yeah, I think we can open the floor for questions from our guests, all of the people who joined who are interested in Catalyst, and you're welcome to raise a hand or put a question in the chat. I see just before I get to Vishwasrayo, sorry about that. I just want to also mention that we have Catalyst faculty member Ben Vakich, and also Angela James, who's a faculty member, and another innovation specialist from the VHA, Gina Green. So all of the people you've met and all of the people I've just mentioned are here to answer your questions. And with that, let's go to Vishwasrayo.
Hey, good afternoon all. Hope you are able to hear me properly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the great presentation and the fellows who shared their experiences. I do have a list of that few questions, but I don't want to take all of them. But one question I'm having is for the fellows working with a diverse team, right? Sometimes when you work with a diverse team with a different expertise like engineering, medical, and other domains, sometimes you get a little bit hard time when working with very trivial things, like some of the terms, things where it might be very trivial in, let's say, medical domain, but the other member who is a technology person who does not understand that kind of language. What was your experience working with a diverse team, and how you were able to collaborate, communicate with a diverse set of people?
So just to summarize that question, it has to do with working with people who are quite different than you and speaking the same language and being able to communicate and move forward together in an effective way. So who would like to respond to that?
I think that
Go ahead,
that
Alex.
was one of the key takeaways that I was explaining and didn't really highlight in detail, but essentially because you have different terminology within your industry that becomes so commonplace, you really do have to take that step back and say, what are the assumptions and terms that I'm saying, that it's clear when someone's not understanding, right? And it's also you're in a trust circle of like being able to say, hey, I don't understand what you're talking about, right? I still sometimes hear these project titles. I'm like, wow, what does that even mean? So
Right.
it's a breakdown, and also very useful that you have to communicate this with people that aren't technical, right? So you're going to become the expert in whatever your projects are. You have to be able to communicate that in layman's terms, or at least meet your audience, right? So that's within your team members for sure. That is an adjustment period. That's why meetings are so beneficial. You and the relationships that you build with them, but then outside with all your pitching as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
I would say it does require that you're open to the idea of explaining what you know to somebody. I have encountered individuals that say it's not worth my time, right? Then you're going to be frustrated. But I think people have learned a lot from one another.
Are there other questions? And please don't feel shy. You know, these are all important. I'm sure others have questions just similar to yours. So please, you know, raise your hand or unmute yourself and take advantage of the opportunity. Mike, did you have a question?
Hey there. Yeah, Mike Brown here. Sorry if I missed it. Is every project set and coming from the VA and the program, or do teams have an ability to push forward their own project that they're bringing to the program?
So perhaps maybe we can have one of the faculty members answer that question.
So I can start, and maybe Ben or Angela, you can add. So it's sort of neither. The VA does not hand us problems, which then we solve, but nor in a direct way, we don't sort of, you bring a project in and then we cover it, right? What happens in the very first phase is that's when we start to figure out what kind of negative outcomes, what problems are we trying to go after, and what are the solutions. That's sort of part of this sort of organic process to identifying those projects. It's definitely influenced by, you know, your personal, or the, you know, collectively the cohort's personal interest in the kinds of problems they want to go after, right? And we support, we ask questions, but that's really up to the cohort of fellows.
Got it. Thank you. And a quick follow-up. I'm based in DC. Do you have a relationship with the DC VA, or is this all VAs in the country, or specifically Boston based?
I think it's any, oh, go ahead, Melissa. Yeah.
All of the INET sites employees are eligible. So there is a drop down in the expression of interest if you have a question about whether or not your site is an INET site. Usually they have innovation specialists as well, and that's part of the support system for Catalyst. But it is nationwide for the VA.
Great, thank you.
We have Lindsay, who has her hand up.
Hi, yes, can you hear me okay? I'm not
Yes.
sure if my video is working, but I did have a question that is directed more towards the VA fellows. As fully staffed at the VA, how did you balance the workload with your day-to-day duties? Did you find that difficult, and what support or resources helped you navigate that?
Emily, do you want to
Sure.
on that one?
So in my department, so Mike Catania is our innovation specialist at Los Angeles, and my chief of the department was supportive. And so I was able to carve out 0.2 FTE in order to participate in the program, including the times of the different meetings and the intensives. And then the rest, you know, I would do as I needed to on my nights and weekends, but it was so stimulating that it just felt like part of what I wanted to do. So it is a mix. I mean, it's definitely an intense few months, but it was super worth it. And I think it helped me, you know, feel more engaged with my day job also, because I had this sort of other activity that I was interested in. But it is good to be really upfront with your department chief and your innovation specialist, so that everybody's aware that you're embarking on this endeavor. The hospitals tend to really love it because it looks really nice for the medical center. And yeah, so it's 100% doable. You know, I think just to be upfront is probably my greatest piece of advice.
Gina, could you offer some thoughts on that as an innovation specialist for a fellow or for a potential fellow who's looking to apply, just doubling down on this idea of trying to engender support and really show what this Catalyst program, how meaningful it is for the potential applicant?
Yeah, I can. I have to be quick because I'm supposed to be on another meeting right now. So yeah, every facility is different. Mike Catania's facility is very supportive and they're really great to work with. I work out of the Cleveland VA, and part of the process involves having our facility director sign an MOU that says, yes, we acknowledge that this fellow has been accepted to the program. And we, at least in my facility, would also say, let's try to carve out some time for this employee. There are VAs that are not as supportive. I'm not going to lie. Everyone has, their own needs in their own facilities. But facilities that have an innovation specialist, which the majority of fellows would come from, generally have a lot of support, and just being very open and honest about what the needs are. And there is a time lift. Those Wednesdays and Mondays are very, very important, but a lot of the work you're going to be doing is also outside of office hours. And that's a heavy lift for a lot of fellows. But that's not interfering with your work time. That's interfering with your personal time. I have not heard any complaints this year of people not having time to attend the meetings or join in on any types of things during the workday. I don't know if Mike has anything else to add about that either.
I have to go to the excuse me, the same meeting as Gina.
Yeah.
I would just say that it's not about being fair, it's about negotiating what you want. So having that conversation and trying to get that point two carved out in writing. It sounds insurmountable, but it's so if you want some help gaming out what that looks like, I'm happy to talk to you and start that there, no matter where.
I'd
Can I
be happy
put
to
my
help with that
email-
too. Oh,
I was just going to say, I put my email in the chat, and Mike's is the same as mine, just his name. So if you want to reach out to either one of us, we're both available to talk. We just have to jump on the other call right now. So
Thanks
yeah, and
very
if
much.
you're a VA employee and you want input about how to negotiate it a little bit with your individual department, I think it's so important to have fellows at as many VAs as possible, because the national diversity is also really nice for the cohort. So feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any hands raised, Melissa.
I don't do, oh,
No,
we have one more.
Vish was around.
Yeah, Vishwas again, sorry. So another question for regarding the external help needed when you are working as a team and try to do some proof of concept. We might need to do market research or customer interactions or talking with the patients, right? Trying to understand the problem in detail. What kind of support do we have as part of this program for that?
So to summarize that question is, if the fellows are are engaged in wanting to do customer discovery, market research, those kind of things, what kind of support is there from the program? And when you say support, what are you thinking of, just so I get an understanding?
Yeah, so let's say we want to talk to some of the, let's say, patients. Do we have tie-up with, like, let's say, some of the hospital system which we can actually talk to and get the list of patients which are actually relevant to our problem statement, and then we can go through the, let's say, surveys or interviews, getting some data points.
Maybe I can jump in on this one. So I'm Ben Vakich. I'm a faculty member in this program and been working with the program for more than 10 years. So in phase one, in the first 6 months, we spent quite a bit of time encouraging and supporting and training the fellows to go out and have those conversations with the relevant subject matter experts, clinicians, and others in the field to understand the problem and to understand the current gaps, as well as the details of a proposed solution. So it's quite a big part of the process. We strongly encourage it and even have training to teach people how to do that well. I would maybe just add a comment that it's not market research in the traditional sense, since we're not an entrepreneurial program. So we're not going out and training people to understand market size or other things that you would do in a more business-oriented program, but it's more interviews to understand the nature of the problem you're looking to solve, the points in which you're trying to intervene, and what are the real needs there, and how a technology might work, or how prior solutions in this area have been introduced and their strengths and weaknesses, things like that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'll add in regards to a fellow that has requested and or I guess even starting with the projects, you have such a diverse network of fellows and faculty, and they will help build connections, whether that's emails, sharing contact info, setting up meetings, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of support there, especially in phase one, as you're trying to like, especially if you don't have someone already in the specific field, to help kind of get those points of contact through to chain down to folks that are willing to talk to you. But then it has continued through phase two, right? As we have different needs, rather than validation of the need of the project, we're looking at human-centered design and ergonomic specialists. So it's just with who you know, also just sending out emails with the MIT Catalysts, like say, hey, we're part of this team. People are usually pretty intrigued and open to discussing and sharing for you.
Great. Are there any other questions, comments? If not, Melissa, obviously, our contact information is available. If there are, specific questions that people have, happy to chat, be it VA, non-VA, program related, or professional related. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining. You're welcome to reach out to me directly. If you have any questions, I can connect you with all of these people. Again, they did leave their email addresses, so that's pretty straightforward. We have the expression of interest form, which we ask you to complete by, I think, July 19th or so. And then once you complete the expression of interest, that will give you the link for the full application. And then you don't have to repeat all of the same information that you completed in the expression of interest. And then we can connect you with a fellow if you'd like to talk a little bit more directly with someone who has similar experience. We'll have your resume or CV available. I see that we're asking for links. All of the information is about the process is available on our recruiting webpage, which I'm dropping into the chat right now. The link for the expression of interest is there. So please be in touch with any questions or concerns, and I will happily help you. Thank you again for joining today.
And I did see there's a question. If you're concerned that you're at a VA and you may not be eligible, just reach out to us. Our most important thing, I think, is that there be support at your institution for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, all of you